All right, welcome everybody. My name is Sabrina. I am the program director at the Eating Disorder Foundation in Denver, Colorado. I'm here to introduce and moderate the event this evening. Though the Eating Disorder Foundation is based in Denver, we are excited and very proud to be providing services all over the nation right now through our virtual support groups, workshops, and presentations. At the Eating Disorder Foundation, our mission is to be prevention and to eliminate eating disorders through education, support, advocacy. We do this by focusing on accessibility and allowing people to get connected to community. We are not a treatment center and we're not directly affiliated with any one treatment provider, but we know intimately the struggles that come with disordered eating and eating disorders. And so our mission is to get people connected and to the care that everybody needs and deserves. Quickly, I'd like to thank everyone who was able to provide a donation for this evening's workshop. This is in how we're allowed to provide free services for people. So thank you. Tonight is part of a three-part workshop. So this evening is tips, tricks, and takeaways for anyone struggling with an eating disorder as an individual. So though the information tonight is geared towards individuals struggling, there's going to be lots of useful information. So if you're finding yourself here and saying, I'm a caregiver, a loved one, or a professional, hang with us. I'm sure there's lots that can be taken from it. And then note that the rest of this series is going to be geared towards different people. So the follow-up will be July 8th, which is going to be for families and friends supporting a loved one in recovery. So if you're here tonight to get some information for yourself, consider who might really benefit from a workshop about how they can get more information and how they can help provide support to you. And then the last workshop we're going to do in this series will be August 26th, Building a Life Worth Living. These workshops have been created by two incredible professionals who are with the Allisons treatment program. Allisons has locations in Alabama, Missouri, California, and they also offer virtual programming, residential programming, and even have a 2-week intensive summer program. You can explore Allisons and everything they offer. I'm going to send their link in the web chat right now. They believe in treatment should meet each client where they are in recovery, and they do this through their adaptive care model, looking at relationships, therapy, nutrition, medical needs, and movement. So now I am really happy to introduce to you our two speakers, and then I will pass along the microphone to them. First, we have Caroline Nichols, a licensed independent clinical social worker in the state of Alabama. Caroline is a certified eating disorder specialist and the national director of family programs at Allisons. Caroline also currently serves as the president-elect of the International Association for Eating Disorder Professionals of the Alabama chapter and has a lot of experience working with eating disorders and many different levels of care. Caroline has also worked with experiences including PTSD, addiction, chronic pain management, family dynamics, and uses various modalities, including emotion-focused family therapy, cognitive processing therapy, prolonged exposure therapy, some EMDR, and is also trained as a family therapy certified caregiver workshop facilitator. So has lots of amazing experience. And then we also have Allison Burnett, who I have had the pleasure of doing workshops with in the past. Allison is a licensed independent clinical social worker and also a certified eating disorder specialist. And Allison is the national director of the alumni and advocacy at Allisons. As a leader of the Social Justice Task Force, Allison helps Allisons assess and implement the needs for LGBTQ clients and people of color with their anti-racism committee and clients in larger bodies for body liberation committees. So I am going to not take up any more time and pass along so that we can get started with the workshop. If you do have questions, again, you can find in the chat, you can send you'll see that there's 3 options: to myself, to Caroline, or Allison. If you could make sure to send it to me that says EDF Denver Sabrina, I'll make sure to collect your questions and we'll get to as many as we can at the end of the workshop. All right. Thank you so much. And if just one last reminder, if everybody could turn their cameras off, that will help with our recording.
Right. Thank you so much, Sabrina, and really everybody at EDF for inviting us. This is really exciting. Allison and I have worked together for, gosh, I guess it's been about 12 years now. And we have never really, in our respective positions now, have never really collaborated. And we've been now asking ourselves why we haven't been collaborating, because my work with the families and supportive others of our Alsana clients and Alsana alumni really coincides very lovely with the work that Allison does with our alumni program. So we are super excited to be here with you guys today. And as Sabrina said, our title for today is, or really for this series, is Scaffolding Support. And so today we're going to be talking about tips, tricks, and takeaways for anyone struggling with an eating disorder. So our hope is that we will be able to, our goals really are to be able to explore the link between connection, support, and a sustainable recovery, to be able to identify some of the very unique challenges that folks with eating disorders face in enhancing their social support systems, and then to provide some practical ways to increase social support. So as we were sort of creating this presentation, it became very apparent that it would be important to define what social support even is, because I think sometimes we can get a very narrow window of what that might look like. And so the American Psychological Association, or the APA, really defines social support as the provision of assistance of comfort to other people. We know that social support might arise from really any interpersonal relationship in an individual social network. So that very often looks like family members, can also look like friends, neighbors, religious institutions, colleagues, caregivers, or support groups. And so I think that's really important for us to remember as we go through this presentation, is that we can sort of flex our muscles a little bit to expand our view of what support can look like. We also know that social support might be very practical help. It might be very tangible support, and it also encompasses emotional support. And so all of these things sort of go into this idea of social support. So as we think about social support, maybe even very specifically to eating disorder recovery, there's a couple of things that I think are really helpful to remember. The first one really is that our need to be connected with other people really begins at birth. I know that a lot of times with the clients that I've worked with, there can be this idea that there's something like wrong with me, or that I desire connection feels wrong or bad. And so what I always want to remind our clients is that your need to be connected with other people began from the very, very beginning, and we're hardwired this way. So there's nothing wrong with wanting connection. It's because we are wired that way. We can't survive without connection to other people. I know sometimes the eating disorder can be very persuasive in this particular realm of convincing us, or trying to convince us, that we don't need other people, that we can do this by ourselves. We know that our social environments really shape who we are. And when those bonds or those connections are threatened or severed, we suffer greatly when that happens. So strong social connections lead to longer lives. Connection with others is the platform for existing, thriving, and flourishing, and that our need for connection is as fundamental as our need for food and water. So again, I think that really drives home this idea that our need for connection is innate. It is hardwired in us, and so there is no I guess there's no cause for that to make us feel bad or that we're somehow wrong or defective in any way. I thought this was a really interesting study. It was done back in 2010, but I really don't think it's changed. But the Harvard study of adult development looked at different contributing factors to make us happier and extend our lives. And what they showed through this study was that relationships with other people were rose above the others in its power to make us happier and extend our lives. So we just know that social support, even outside of the eating disorder, is critical for all of us.
Can I
When
jump
we
in real
look,
quick?
oh yeah,
Can I
go
jump
ahead,
in?
go ahead, yeah.
Hi, sorry. So I work with former clients, right? And Caroline works with family members, so this is a great team effort. And when I talk to the clients about, or the former clients or whoever struggling with the eating disorder about connection and how it's improving their lives, and Caroline touched on this. If you were a psychology major or took psychology 101, you know Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And the first one is physiological, then safety, then it's love and belonging. It's connected to people. And so we are wired, like Caroline said, we are wired for connection, and it improves life quality and it improves recovery. So I just wanted to throw that out there because,
Yeah.
A lot of people know Maslow's hierarchy of needs or what have you, but it is a need for all humans, this connection.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so then when we break that down a little bit more specifically to eating disorders, it was actually really interesting as we were putting together this presentation, because we know that eating disorders thrive in isolation, and in some ways really love it when we are isolated. And so we actually saw this play out on a very big scale last year with COVID and the pandemic and sort of everything that happened. And so I think that's just fascinating as we're doing this presentation to be able to just look over the past, oh gosh, I mean, how 15 months of kind of what has happened. And very interestingly, NEDA, which is the National Eating Disorder Association helpline, saw a 94% increase in calls and messages between March and September of last year. I mean, that is an astronomical increase. And we know that a lot of that was due to people being isolated. So as we look below, we know that there was a significant increase in relapse among those folks who were actually doing very well prior to the pandemic. I know at Alsana specifically, we had our admissions were, on par with everybody else's in the industry. But we had a lot of clients that had been doing very, very well in their recovery, and just the pressure of being isolated and loss of routine and loss of support really contributed to relapse. We also saw about an 80 to 90% increase in general anxiety, depression, and adjustment disorders, which we know are all risk factors for an eating disorder and can be risk factors for those who are in recovery. And so I think these numbers are just really staggering. And I think we can trace a lot of it back to being isolated. This was interesting to me too. So eating disorders became more prevalent. This was a study that looked at insurance claims in 2020. And so eating disorder claims for treatment became much more prevalent in 2020 and actually moved up to the 5th most prominent mental health condition by August 2020, where eating disorders had been holding steady at like number 6. So I think that is actually very significant as well. One of the other things that I think we can all, I mean, we're on Zoom right now instead of being able to be with you guys in person, but, due to social isolation, there has been a huge uptick in people turning to social media for social interaction. And in some ways, this has been a lifeline and a lifesaver for so many people. And I think we are all very aware of some of the negative impact that social media can have on eating disorder recovery, body image, things like that. We also know that research shows that people with eating disorders have better results related to a full sustained eating disorder recovery when they have supportive others or family members involved in their treatment and recovery process. And so I always want to highlight that to the clients that I work with and to the families and supportive others that I work with, is that we are not meant to thrive in isolation, and there is no expectation um, really that's out there that says you should be able to recover on your own, and do treatment on your own, and that you have to navigate through this all on your own. So Allison, I'm gonna throw it over to you for a minute.
Sure thing. So, like mentioned earlier, I work with the clients after they discharge from treatment. And so I polled the audience and I asked them, what are your thoughts on support? And got a lot of great quotes. And this is being recorded, so you can read this. I'll just summarize it. But the overall consensus, to me, it seems like when I say clients, I mean people outside of treatment, know that they need support and they don't want to need support. And they have all these barriers and challenges of their own internal negative thoughts and feelings about seeking support. And so there's this theme or pattern of, once I leave eating disorder treatment, I am done with treatment, and I just want to wash my hands clean with that, and I'm going to get my support from my outpatient team. And really, that could be enough for some, and I think for a lot, it's not enough, because you go from residential PHP, IOP, what have you, to an outpatient team, and so you miss that community, that support, that group network. That, oh, you relate to this, I relate to that, that connection that we're talking about. And a lot of the alumni, talking from my experiences, they're full of shame to ask for support, and they're scared to, and then they don't know how, and it's a hard road to cross of getting the individual struggling with an eating disorder to ask for support. And what does that look like? And what does that mean? And how can I receive what support is being given without being like, that's not what I need. That is not at all, but able to receive what is being given and take what I can get, kind of thing. That kind of weird.
I moved the slide to the next one.
Yeah, no worries. So another thing I try to, Allison's key to recovery is connection. I tell the alumni that all the time. I think, yes, obviously treatment team, meal plan, all these things. And outside of that, it's connection. It's building a life. It's connecting with others who relate and who've never had an eating disorder. And so seeking support and feeling supportive can be different from like, hey, I'm struggling with said behavior. Can you help with me in this moment? It could be, hey, can we watch a movie together? That's support. That's connection. It could be like in here, it says sitting in silence can be supportive for me. As Allison, the human being, I think sitting with my friends in silence is some of the best times I've had. Think about your own experience. You just watch something on TV, or you're just connecting, or even if you're just sharing the same space, just know you're not alone and you're connected in that space can be very powerful. And so sometimes I try to shift what support looks like, and in a way where it doesn't have to be as big and as scary to our clients, former clients, people who struggle with users, as, hey, I'm struggling with this, I need you, On the receiving end, I'm not a therapist. I don't know how to, how can I help you? What do I need? But like just being in that physical space and sharing an event or an activity or whatever can be supportive to me. That's all I got on that one.
So interestingly enough, I sort of did the same thing as Allison and kind of polling our family members, because I think one of the things, and as Sabrina mentioned earlier, our next presentation in July is going to be much more focused on families and supportive others. So we can talk a little bit more about that then. But one of the things that I really experience with regard to working with our family, Alsana families, Alsana alumni families and supportive others is this idea of like, I want to be able to support my loved one, but I don't know how. And so you can read these. I'm not going to read these, but just sort of to summarize this, but we're very excited at Alsana to be able to provide support groups and support, workshops and psychoeducational workshops and things like that to the families in support of others, so that we can help them get to a place where they are able to provide more effective support. And relationships tend to thrive when needs are getting met. And so a lot of times prior to coming to us, there's this mismatch. And so I always just think it's really interesting when family members really seem to grasp the importance of their role in their loved one's recovery. Now, sometimes it needs tweaking a little bit. We need to get everybody back in their right place. But there is one specific little quote that I wanted to talk about, just because I think it was very powerful to me as a mom that came to one of our support groups, and for a long time she didn't speak, and I was like, she's never going to come back. Like, this is not going to be somebody that attends, and oh, that feels gross, but maybe that's okay. It's just sort of her process. And she has been somebody that literally comes every single week, and she comes to our alumni, our family of alumni support group every week too. And you can see her quote down here at the bottom of just being in the company of other people that have a shared experience with loving someone who has an eating disorder and really desiring to be supportive. I love that she says, like, it's helped me to open up, not only here, but in other spaces. And I've been able to heal. And so, for me, that's like, oh gosh, yes, this is amazing. And so I just wanted to share that with you guys before we move forward. So, Allison.
On that note, it's really cool. I mean, I just, like Caroline, works with family and loved ones, and I work with the clients once they discharge. And similar, I have these former clients who come and like, I don't need any time, I don't need to check in, I just welcome them. I'm just grateful you're here, and as long as they're there and connecting, like that's good, that's hopeful. Like, I'm not going to push them, and then eventually they'll start to open up, which is great to see. And so shifting gears. Also, I wanted to say, I keep looking up this way. I have double monitors, and I'm looking at the presentation. I'm not like distracted or anything like that. I'm just looking at the presentation on the second monitor. So we have these challenges, right, of people with eating disorders asking for help, seeking for support, what have you. And we have listed a lot of them, and we've talked a bit about them. And there's a lot of us like, I don't want to be a burden. I've tried before. It didn't work. It's not going to work this time. No matter if it's like 2 weeks we've tried or 10 years we've tried, right? And no one gets me. I shouldn't need anyone. I should be able to do this on my own. Those are just some random examples. So we want to actually hear from you. So there's a QR code on your screen. If you could hold your phone up to it with your camera and just hover over the QR code, and then you'll hopefully, if all things go according to plan, be directed to it's a very anonymous. We're not going to share the screen. I'm just going to read out different challenges that y'all have faced with maybe you struggle with an eating disorder and or you're a family member, other challenges that you have experienced with seeking support, with seeking help. Okay, good job. We already got some comments. Uneducated people making comments. Woo! Listen, I could do a 10-hour presentation on that. Stigma, well done. Lack of resources. I'm just going to give it a couple minutes because then I get really not organized in my thoughts. But yeah, keep them coming, and let's see what we have, and if we have any themes or patterns in our responses. So I'm looking at as they pop up, and they don't pop up like this. It's a very random thing. So that's why okay. So one is, I feel like my eating disorder isn't bad enough. I'm just going to read these out loud. Insensitivity. Do I really have an eating disorder? For older adults, not having any social circles, marginalization, sorry, the boxes keep moving, because we're disabled, moving to a new city during a pandemic. Oh, virtual meetings at capacity and can't get in. Also with that, virtual meetings being so big that you're unable to feel seen or feel heard. That's, yeah, I heard that one. My family wants to help with diet culture. I wish these popped up in order. My friends are all impossibly connected to fitness, diet culture. Yeah. When you do have the courage to reach out and are met with indifference or people saying they have too much going on in their lives to be there for you, gotcha. Scared of how to explain what it is I'm struggling with and why I have an eating disorder. Past failures. Okay. Lack of support systems for eating disorders in my area. Really, if you use Padlet, I hope there's just better ways to do this. I'm just reading them as I come, but it's like all moving around.
Should we keep moving just for the sake of time?
Yeah,
or
yeah.
Okay.
There's definitely a theme of a couple of different buckets, really, and all comparisons. That's a good one. So all of these different themes are totally valid, and not like you're not alone in these like challenges of seeking treatment or seeking help, seeking support, whether you have eating disorder and or you are the loved one of someone struggling with. Yeah, so I appreciate y'all's thoughts on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, we could.
Okay. Sorry.
Me again. Okay.
Yeah.
so I was looking at the Padlet responses, and I'm thinking back on the experience that I have with, clients and former clients and blah, blah, blah. And most of it comes down to shame and feeling vulnerable and seeking help and bringing that authentic and that gooey stuff we don't want to talk about to light and saying, hey, I need help. Hey, I need support. Hey, I need, period. Needs are very hard for lots of people, especially those struggling with eating disorders. And a lot of the times I lead groups in our programs, and I lead groups obviously outside of when they leave treatment. And it's like this barrier of shame that prevents people from sharing, but it only takes one. And then it creates a domino effect. And someone will say something like, hey, this, I do this, or I did this, or I feel this, and I am so shameful and no one can relate to me, and someone relates. And that's what it takes. So like there's this shame part, and then bringing it to light brings people to relate to it, and then it takes less power. It takes the power away from it in terms of shame. Does that make sense, Caroline? What I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. So Brene Brown, who we all love, I'm sure everyone loves Brene Brown, said it best. I'm actually going to read this one. I don't normally do this. Shame is often referred to as swampland of the soul. I'm not suggesting that we wade into the swamp and set up camp. Remember that. I've done that, and I can tell you that the swampland of the soul is an important place to visit, but you don't want to live there. What I'm proposing is that we learn how to wade through it. We need to see that standing on the shore and catastrophizing about what could happen, if we talked honestly about our fears, is actually more painful than grabbing the hand of a trusted companion and crossing the swamp. And most important, we need to learn by constantly trying to maintain our footing of the shifting shore as we gaze across to the other side of the swamp, where our worthiness waits for us is much harder than trudging across. So if you don't know Brene Brown, please look up Brene Brown. Everyone drinks the Kool-Aid of Brene Brown, but there's a safety in setting up camp in the shame swamp, and there's no judgment related to that. But people who have shameful things or struggling with eating disorders, it's safe. It's safe to be in this swamp area where I can hang out in my shame, and I know what's going to happen. I know how I'm going to feel, and it's going to be crap, but it's known. I can keep you out of it. I don't want you to come in it. I don't want you to see this swamp. So I'm going to hang out here in the safety, because if I leave said swamp, I'm going to have to talk about it. And that's terrifying. Us from the outside, we're like, you're in a swamp? Like, come on, like hang out with us on the mainland. But it's hard when you're in the depths of it, right? And you're in that swampland, and you can't see said mainland.
Yeah. So I think as we talk about shame, this has been so helpful for me just in my practice and in my life, is really understanding the difference between guilt and shame. Oh, sorry. So we know that guilt is focused on behavior. So this is saying I did something bad, and the apology or looks a little bit like I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Okay, and so this is a very adaptive emotion and experience for all of us, because we're human, we're not perfect. And so there are going to be times where we do things that rub up against our values and morals, right? Shame is focused on the self. And so what shame says is, I am bad. And the apology for shame looks like, I'm sorry, I am a mistake. And I think it's really important to understand the difference between that, because it can be really confusing. And so I love this quote by Brene Brown where she says, guilt is just as powerful, but its influence is positive, while shame's is destructive. Shame erodes our courage and fuels disengagement. And so getting to the root of our shame and being able to work through our shame allows us to be more open to connecting with other people. And we don't say this lightly, because this is incredibly, incredibly difficult, courageous work. So please don't think we're saying, oh, you should just get rid of your shame and that'll be great. Like we are not being flippant about that at all. We know that the antidote to shame is vulnerability, which is that word that makes everybody just cringe. It's like, ugh.
Can I pause on that real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Caroline and I were talking about this presentation, and I Googled the word vulnerability, and it's a wild definition of, this might even be in this. I'm sorry if I'm like skipping ahead. It's vulnerable to physical attack from the animal world. Like, that is the definition if you Google that.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times we hear that word vulnerable, and it's like, I'm going to be attacked from the outside, and I have to be like turtle shell and go inside it so I'm not vulnerable. So I have this hard thing on top of me to protect it. But that is the definition from, Discovery Channel world, like physical attack. And it can be an emotional attack. It's emotionally vulnerable. I think of like a dog when they like roll over and they show their belly, like they're very vulnerable. I have one dog who doesn't do it because she has this, we're working through it. But I think a lot of times us as humans, our friends and family who have eating disorders, think being vulnerable and means I'm going to be crushed. I'm going to be hurt. People are going to use this against me. This is not going to go well because of that, I don't know, animalistic sort of definition. Sorry,
well, and I think that's true though, because I mean, as we think about vulnerability, and we have this here on the slide, like it carries an inherent risk of emotional woundedness. Like there is risk involved in being vulnerable, and that's true. Like, I mean, we can't pretend it's not, and we can't sugarcoat it. I mean, there is risk to being vulnerable. Unlike the sort of scary, like animal kingdom, definition of vulnerability, we really like this definition from Brene Brown of like vulnerability is the uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure, and it's having the courage to show up and be seen when we don't have control over the outcome. And therein lies the risk of emotional woundedness, because we don't know what people are going to do with our stories. We don't know what people are going to do with our pain. So if we think about like, how do we show up in our relationships? Like, how do we sort of start to make a little bit of that shift towards showing up in vulnerability? And so I think one of the first things we can do is just acknowledge that vulnerability is difficult. It's hard. It's not easy really for, I would think, like the majority of people. And so that is sort of a connection that we all have as humans, is that it's not specific to just people that struggle with eating disorders that vulnerability is difficult. It's everybody. And so I think we can just acknowledge that. I think we can acknowledge that in our relationships of like, hey, I'm trying to do this vulnerability thing and it is really hard. It's kicking my fanny right now. Like it's tough. We can start to invite our support system into our swamps, like that swampy, like the shame swamp. Because what we really know is that like the people that love us and care about us, they're looking for an invitation in to be able to sit with us in that and to be able to help us come out of it. We can also look to the people in our life that display vulnerability and learn from them. I think about people, because I'm not like this. This totally freaks me out, but people that have so much courage and like vulnerability to share their stories through like blogs or things like that. Like that's a great way to look at vulnerability. I am always in awe of these types of humans that can do this, because it makes me like literally feel physically sick. And so I think we can look to examples in our lives and in our worlds of vulnerability and learn from these folks. Ease into this. You don't have to go out and like share your most shameful secret or whatever with like the next person you see. So this is like a kind of, it can be a slow roll. Clarify your feelings and keep checking in with yourself. Or maybe I shouldn't say have, because that might feel like a judgmental thing, but maybe work towards developing empathy and compassion for your story and your struggles. Validate the feelings of others and have empathy and compassion for their story and struggles as well. So again, just some ways that we can kind of shift gently towards showing up with more vulnerability in our relationships with others. So
Can you go
Allison, I'm
back
going
real quick?
to yeah, go ahead. You want to say
Oh,
something?
the validate the feelings of others and have empathy and compassion for their story and struggles. And so I think a lot of a powerful moment, and I don't know how to word it, but I'll get to that, is let's say we're in a support group with others who struggle with eating disorders, and someone shares their story or their struggle or what have you, and then someone else, similar situation, has compassion and empathy for that person, but not for themselves. And so, and then, we maybe point it out, reflect it, and see if they can, if this person can shift it. Like, I have so much compassion for everyone else, right? I have so much empathy for everyone else's struggle and success and story and everything. And yet I am my own worst critic, And so we can practice our vulnerability by listening to others' vulnerability, which is difficult. You have a group of individuals who no one wants to be vulnerable, who's going to do it. But we can practice that by hearing their story, receiving it, being empathetic, and then I relate to that. Like that sentence alone, I relate to that, can be huge. I'm not being dramatic at all, but like the sentence, I relate to that, can be really powerful in someone giving vulnerability and receiving that vulnerability.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I love that, Allison. And I this keeps coming into my mind. I just want to say it because I'm scared I'm going to forget. But in that same vein, as we talk about like attending support groups and there might be people you don't know and all of this kind of thing, I think just showing up, even if you don't say a word, that is vulnerability. That is showing up in vulnerability. It is bearing witness to the stories of other people. It is, kind of coming out of the darkness. So, I think that's really important to keep in mind, that like, if you are someone that, you're like, oh gosh, maybe a support group would be helpful, but that makes me feel really icky and gross. Like just being there and just listening is vulnerable. And so, kudos to anybody that can do that, because that can be really scary as well. So just showing up, just being there is a very vulnerable act as well. So, all right, Allison, we've got just a few more minutes. So let's take it home with some practical ways to look at building support.
Let's knock it out of the park. Because I have 8 million side stories I want to go on, but I guess I will not. All the things. I just had to do one real quick. As a therapist, I take for granted how vulnerable it is to show up to a support group to show up to a workshop, to show up for anything. Me, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna do my support group, gotta run it, gotta lead it, and I always have to remind myself, sorry, there's a dog barking in the background. She's fine, just ignore her. I always have to remind myself, like, for that individual showing up, they maybe have procrastinated or be like, I can't do it for months. And I have to respect that and bring that and never, I'm going to murder my small dog. It's fine. I need to respect that and hold it for that individual. Sorry. Okay. So, the small dog, she's fine. Her name is Mocha. She's cute. I'll bring her up in a minute. But so there's practical ways to increase support. And what I do is different from what Caroline does, because I think we're a great team, just saying. I work with those who struggle with English, Caroline's family and friends. And so I talk to them like, it's not your role to educate. It's not your role to be their therapist. It's not, but they're not your therapist, so understanding the capacity of your support system, understanding that they're human. They're gonna make mistakes. They're not available 24/7. Your therapist is not available 24/7. If your therapist is available 24/7, it's not a good therapist. That's unethical. No offense. Sorry, but it's not. So understanding that let's pretend we're all in the outpatient world. Outpatient teams and your family and friends, they cannot be the one and only thing that we're holding on to, And it's a difficult line to balance. And we want to be able to feel okay seeking support, telling said support system, outpatient teams, family and friends, like, hey, this is going on. And if they can't respond, they're on vacation, whatever, we're okay holding our own posture, if that makes sense. Which we can go into a whole nother presentation on that incident in itself. But just realizing, like, no, it's not black and white. I mean, I would love it to be. I love a black and white. As Allison the human, sign me up. Black and white all day, every day. Gray scares me, concerns me. I understand that. I get it. So I would love it. I would absolutely love this world if it was black and white, but it's not, and people aren't black and white. So just sort of understanding like the responsibility of the support system and themselves, and spread out that support amongst people.
Well, and I was going to say one thing that, because this is something that I see a lot, and there are so many. We could go into a whole nother presentation about this. There are lots of reasons why it is hard to pull people into the treatment and recovery process. And so all of those reasons are very valid. But one of the things that I think, Allison and I can like agree on and that we see often is this whole idea. It's like a push-pull. It's like, I want my support system to understand. I want them to support me in this different way. And yet they're not allowing their support system to be involved. And so it's this catch-22 and sort of this self-fulfilling prophecy of like, it never happens. And so, I think one of the things that we would say is that it's very important to provide opportunities, or at least don't block opportunities for your support system to feel supported and do their own work and to become educated. With the caveat that, like Allison said, it's not your responsibility to educate your support system. That is exhausting. And there's much more important work to be done. And there are many, many, many resources available for your support system to be able to be educated and supported. So you encourage that, or at least don't block those opportunities. So I just wanted to share that. So, okay. Yeah. We talked about sort of this idea of being very realistic in the capacity and the appropriate responsibility of your support system. So like an example might be, I'm really struggling with my meal plan, it's whatever, there are these issues. Well, you might want to talk about it with your best friend, and that's fine, but is your best friend really going to be able to walk you through why your meal plan is as it is, or to help you make changes? And so it's thinking about, like, if I'm struggling with some particular issue, who is the most appropriate person or the most appropriate support team member or human to go to get that need met. Of course, sharing your story, again, vulnerability. We could talk about that all day. One of the wonderful things that has come out of COVID, if there can be such a thing, is that there are so many different virtual options for support. And we also know that it can feel very powerful to share your story with others with shared experience. And this reduces shame and increases vulnerability. So I think we would also say, like, have a willing stance towards support. I think a lot of people mentioned, like, I've done this before and it wasn't helpful, or my support team just like didn't get it. And so I think as we enter into this, we have to um Marsha Linehan, who does DBT, always sort of does this like open hands thing, and it can be kind of like uncomfortable a little bit, but also it's like this willingness and this open stance towards, like, okay, I'm gonna give this a try. I'm gonna try it again, and maybe I'm gonna try it in some different ways, but not being closed off to the possibility that support can be helpful, and maybe it just needs to look different. Recovery groups, AA, NA, Al-Anon, Celebrate Recovery, Codependence Anonymous, and then joining groups for social support and connection. I'm not actually very good at this. Allison is excellent at this, so I'll let her close us out with just like a few minutes or a few little whatever about that.
Yes, real quick. Case example, I have a former client who lives in a very metropolitan area, and various reasons, their insurance doesn't allow for lots of resources. However, with regard to mental health and eating disorder stuff, however, there are lots of free other options. And again, these options aren't the end all be all, and it can help with connection. Again, Allison's Key to Recovery, connection, you can quote me. So get involved with any, like, something I talk to our alumni about all the time are like, what's your friend group? Do you have friends? What happened? Can we repair these relationships? Do you want to? Who is healthy in your life? Because friends can be a powerful support, not the only support, just let you know, but just engaging in different support groups or different communities outside of my treatment team, outside of eating disorder support groups. Yes, very important. We're going to have a slide on all the things that this lovely group offers. Do it, all of them, and join other things. There's this random, I said sports fan bases. Randomly, there's this group on Facebook that I'm in, and it's this thing about soccer, and they're like, hey, we're going to be here, show up, you don't even have to know anybody. And like, that's a community. I've never done it, but that's a community that I'm in, and I feel invested, I feel connected, and I want to join, and I'm wearing a soccer jersey right now. And it's just these little ways to connect with others, and that you might not even tell them, oh, I have an eating disorder and I, whatever, but you're connecting on all this other stuff. You know what I mean? And just being there and showing up is vulnerable in itself to this new experience. So yeah. I get really excited about stuff like this. So I'm going to bring it in and give it to Caroline.
Because we actually, our last presentation in this series is going to be talking a little bit more specifically about like how to build a life outside of your eating disorder. And so
spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert. So again, like Allison mentioned, I mean, we're all here thanks to EDF, but I mean, good grief, look at this list. If you guys are not familiar with this list of these amazing support groups that are free, familiarize yourself. This is, I mean, there's something for everybody on here. So you can check out their website for more information on their support groups if you're not aware of what they provide. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I guess we can just open it up for questions, if that's okay with Sabrina and the folks at EDF.
Yes. Okay, thank you so much. I've had, and throughout you sharing and going through all those slides, I've had a lot of interaction as well. Some people that were joining on their phones that couldn't do the QR code, popping in as well with, struggles of like families understanding or, being validated in whatever eating disorder we may have or may not have a diagnosis for, saying this is still a legitimate experience and, a feeling of trying to like explain that to somebody. But I do have some questions here. This one came through when you were sharing and discussing Brene Brown and stepping into the swamp. So one of our participants shares that they have a mom who they also believe might be struggling with an eating disorder, but doesn't really want to admit it. For this individual, the mom is one of the few and most important social supports that they have right now. So the question is, how do I bring her into the swamp if she's afraid to dip her toe in because it might open up a whole nother swamp of her own?
Yeah,
I know
that's a really great question.
that's a tough question.
I don't know if I have a best right answer. These questions can be sometimes very difficult because people are different and every relationship is different. I think the thing that kind of comes to mind is, what would it look like for somebody that is struggling with an eating disorder, that, like, what would it look like to expand support? Because if your primary support system is somebody that is very fearful of stepping into the swamp, I don't think that means they can't provide support, but it's feasible that we have to adjust our expectations of what that might look like. And so, you know, looking maybe a little bit at capacity, if I have a support member that isn't able or willing to go into the swamp, um what is their capacity for being able to support me, right? And then being able to look at, okay, what would it look like to expand my support system so that I do have people in my life that can go into the swamp with me? And I don't think that cheapens the relationship with somebody who isn't able to do that. Um, but I think for our own like recovery, we have to be able to sort of take a step back and look at situations as they are and acknowledge capacity and responsibility and those kinds of things. So that's kind of coming to mind. Allison, I don't know, you might have something else to say about that.
Yeah, I retweet Caroline, and because my fear would be, so I'm in my swamp with my eating disorder, and my mother or whoever has their own thing, on the swamp. And so my fear is if I invite them in the swamp and they're like, yes, because my relationship is important with you, blah, 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 and I'm there, and then somehow now I'm in both swamps, then I'd start taking care of that person instead of myself. So that is the biggest fear. I don't know why, but I keep thinking of the analogy when you're on the airplane and they're like, you put your mask on before you help anyone else. If your support system, and this is not even just parents, this is everybody. If your someone in your support network isn't able to put their mask on themselves, they're not going to be able to best support you. And that's okay. They need to take care of themselves. The fear is, because this happens, is like, oh gosh, I'm me struggling with eating disorder. I'm going to go take care of this person because I don't need to look at myself. I'm just going to, second, and I'll stop. Carol and I talk a lot about like someone struggling with eating disorder. I have this need. It is a circle. This is an analogy. Just go with me. It is a circle. Parent goes, all I have is a square. I can take what's the square and make it the circle, or I can say, no, that is not a circle. I don't need this. I can't take it. I hope my analogy is making sense. So there's this possibility maybe of taking what mom can do and just holding that and taking that and then grieving that the other part. Also, this is lots of therapy. Or there's like, no, you can't do anything. So I'm not going to take anything.
Yeah.
If you want to talk more about this, just email me because my analogies sometimes
Yeah.
don't make sense.
Yeah.
In Alabama, I go to bed at 9. I have no idea what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hope that made sense. I don't know, but yeah.
Well, and I think that the truth is like there is and really isn't anywhere ever one direct answer. So a lot of stuff falls into it, and really depending on the relationship and just when we're ready to take what risk or step, right?
Right.
So yes. All right. I'm just catching up on some other questions coming in. Lots of thank yous. So I want to share that with the presenters. And then wondering, so I do want to remind everyone, this will be recorded and the recording will be sent out. I've got a lot of requests about some of the slides being shared as well. So I'm curious, perhaps if there are some of the resources that we can put in a PDF and maybe send that to everybody.
Yep.
So that all the information can be accessible again. And then, so I have another question. Bear with me because I've got to scroll up and down. Okay, here we are. So a question around eating disorder and other behaviors that are outside of eating disorder behaviors and likely related. I'm trying to read this question. Any advice around, in order to have a healthier life while not leaning into behaviors during quitting, an example, maybe smoking, it's brought on a lot of a significant amount of other things such as depression or other behaviors that kind of, we fall into one thing or the other. Can both of you touch on that a little bit?
I'm gonna let Allison go because I'm not 100% sure I understood the question. So Allison, I'm gonna let you go and then I'll jump in.
I think they're asking like a whack-a-mole situation.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like as
is that
the
what they're
eating disorder
doing?
gets better, we see an exacerbation in other behaviors. Is that sort of what we are saying here, Sabrina?
I'm going to clarify, but yes, that is what I'm reading, which is
Okay.
like kind of what skills might exist to not like just kind of replace behaviors or fall into a different behavior. And it's seeming like this question is like, maybe it's not specifically eating disorder related, but they kind of, kind of whack-a-mole, I think is what best describes it. I'll check too with this person.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Well, that could be a whole nother hour. So I think the symptom swapping and whack-a-mole, very common. You're not alone. It's okay. And we have to figure out what function, what need is being met by eating disorder, by alcohol, by self-harm, by what have you. Some of these may overlap, some of these may be completely different. And so the root of the issue is what we need to uncover and work on, like with therapy and all the things. And then the other, this is your work internally with your therapist. The other side would be what helps in that moment. So what helps, like coping skill related, people hear coping skills, like, oh, coping skills, oh, can't handle it. It's so obnoxious. What helps coping skill related with eating disorder behaviors might not help with self-harm, might not help with substance use. And so we have to figure out what need is being met and how can I cope with that until the urge passes, kind of thing, while working on this underlying issue. Does that make sense, Caroline?
Yeah, no, I was going to say the same thing. I mean, I think like at the crux of recovery from any maladaptive behavior is looking at the function. And I mean, that is one of the core things we do at Allisons, because we know like neurologically, that is one of the things that perpetuates eating disorders is that they serve a function, or we wouldn't engage in the behaviors. And so, yeah, I think for any behavior, it's really looking at what function does it serve, what need is it meeting, or what need are we hoping it's meeting, but it's not actually meeting. And that's where the work really happens. It's where the magic happens.
The magic. Good question, though.
That's a great question.
It was an excellent question, and I did get a response saying yes, this was a much bigger question than so really contemplative. So contemplative. So we are out of time. I want to just remind everybody before we sign off that the next workshop is going to be July 8th. I'm going to put this in the chat. Oh, hello, there's the pup who was saying hello to everyone. And then the third workshop is going to be August 26th. So thank you, Caroline. Thank you, Allison. And we'll work on getting a follow-up email and sending everybody the recording.
Awesome.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much for having us. We really love this. So we're looking forward to being with you guys next month.
Us too. Bye, everyone.